12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
Many men have dreamed of traversing the stars, but very few have had the chance to. That was until a feud between two countries started a blast in the need for space travel. Our journey begins in late 1957, a time when the world witnessed the birth of the space age. The Soviet Union, who was in geopolitical tension with the United States of America, made the first groundbreaking move by launching the first man-made satellite named Sputnik into outer space. Sputnik shocked everyone with its signature beeps being heard around the world when tuning into a certain frequency. The United States and its people speculated what the Soviet Union could do with this technology, and when it was theorized that they could launch missiles across the world, it sparked fear in the U.S. and its people. So thus, the race for control over the stars had commenced, and the Soviet Union was in the lead. The next adventure into space was in April of 1961, when the Soviet Union decided to complete the task of sending a human into space. Yuri Alexeyev Gagarin was a Soviet pilot and cosmonaut who became the first human in space. In 1961, after his launch, he orbited the Earth once aboard the Vostok 1 space capsule, which took him 1 hour and 29 minutes. As a result of accomplishing the task of being the first human in space, he became an international celebrity and received many awards for this achievement, both within and outside the Soviet Union.
Товарищ первый секретарь Центрального комитета Коммунистической партии Советского Союза, председатель Совета министров СССР.
The next human-occupied spaceflight was the Soyuz 1 mission, which was manned by Vladimir Komarov, a Russian cosmonaut. But due to a failure on launch, then a failure on re-entry to Earth, Vladimir Komarov became the first fatality in the race for the stars. Vladimir was commemorated with a state funeral in Moscow, and his ashes were interred in the Kremlin Wall necropolis at Red Square. The American astronauts requested the Soviet government to allow a representative to attend, but were turned down. Meanwhile, the United States tried to catch up by sending Alan Shepard Jr., a Navy commander and one of NASA's first 7 astronauts.
I want to express, on behalf of us all, the great pleasure we have in welcoming Commander Shepard and Mrs. Shepard here today. I think they know, as citizens of this great country, how proud we are of him, what satisfaction we take in his accomplishment, what a service he has rendered our country.
He became the first American to travel into space on May 5, 1961. Shepard was launched into space from Cape Canaveral, Florida, aboard the Freedom 7 space capsule, Auber, which only had enough room for 1 person.
Trajectory looks A-OK.
It is okay.
Pitch control A-OK.
Switching to manual yaw.
Switching.
Tom, how do you read now? Roger, Deke, reading you loud and clear, Harvey. Switched over to GDI.
Now talking to us via a link radio
Roger.
Bahama Island, and we're reading him loud and clear.
The drogue is green at 21. The periscope is out.
Drogue parachute
The
has
drogue
deployed.
is out.
The drogue parachute has deployed.
Okay, at drogue deploy, I've got 70%. Auto, 90% manual. Oxygen is still okay. And the snorkel's at about 15,000 feet. Emergency flow rate is on.
The medical monitor and the Mercury
Standing
control
by
center
for
reports
main.
the pilot A-OK all the way. The main parachute
Main
has
on
deployed.
green.
The main parachute
Main
has
chute is
deployed.
reefed.
The Mercury spacecraft Freedom 7 is now
Main
descending
chute
on
is
its
green.
main parachute,
Main chute is coming unraised and it looks good.
as was expected at about...
The flight, which did not orbit Earth, lasted about 15 minutes and reached a height of 116 miles into the atmosphere before splashing down in the Atlantic Ocean. The mission was a success. Shepard went on to take part in several other NASA missions, including Apollo 14, which landed on the Moon in 1971. He became the 5th astronaut to walk on the Moon and the first person to hit a golf ball on the Moon. John Glenn was born in Ohio. He was in college when World War II started. Glenn left school to fight in the war. He became a Marine pilot. Later, he trained other pilots. He also fought in the Korean War. After Korea, he became an airplane test pilot. In 1957, Glenn set a speed record when he flew from Los Angeles to New York in less than 3.5 hours. In 1959, NASA picked the first group of astronauts. The 7 men would fly on the Mercury spacecraft. NASA called these men the Mercury 7. John Glenn was one of them. In 1962, John Glenn became the first American to orbit Earth. He named his spacecraft Friendship 7. He made 3 orbits around Earth. He spent about 5 hours in space. His mission showed that the Mercury spacecraft worked in space. The mission also helped NASA learn more about being in space. After John Glenn left NASA, he became a U.S. Senator from the state of Ohio. He was a senator for 25 years. Later, Glenn worked with college students at Ohio State University in Columbus. In 1961, Kennedy delivered a historic speech that would define the next decade.
Between freedom and tyranny, the dramatic achievements in space which occurred in recent weeks should have made clear to us all, as did the Sputnik in 1957, the impact of this adventure on the minds of men everywhere who are attempting to make a determination of which road they should take. Since early in my term, our efforts in space have been under review. With the advice of the Vice President, who is Chairman of the National Space Council, we have examined where we are strong and where we are not, where we may succeed and where we may not. Now it is time to take longer strides, time for a great new American enterprise, time for this nation to take a clearly leading role in space achievement, which in many ways may hold the key to our future on Earth. I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the Moon and returning him safely to the Earth. No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind or more important for the long-range exploration of space, and none will be so difficult or expensive to accomplish.
In 1965 through 1966, the Gemini program began. Gemini was an early NASA human spaceflight program. Gemini helped NASA get ready for the Apollo moon landings. 10 crews flew missions on the 2-man Gemini spacecraft. The Gemini missions were flown in 1965 and 1966. They flew between the Mercury and Apollo programs. Astronauts accomplished many things on the Gemini missions. The first flight to carry astronauts was Gemini 3, also known as Gemini Titan 3 or GT3. That flight tested the new vehicle. The Gemini 4 mission included the first U.S. spacewalk. Gemini 5 stayed in orbit for more than a week. The Gemini 6A and 7 missions were in space at the same time and met each other in orbit. Gemini 7 stayed in space for 2 weeks. Gemini 8 connected with another unmanned spacecraft in orbit. The Gemini 9 mission tested separate ways of flying near another spacecraft. It also included a spacewalk. Gemini 10 connected with another spacecraft and used its engines to move both vehicles. The Gemini 11 mission flew higher than any NASA mission before. The last mission, Gemini 12, solved problems from earlier spacewalks.